What would you do if you heard footsteps approaching your door at 11 p.m. and you knew those footsteps belonged to a killer? Now imagine being trapped in a dormitory with 7 other nurses, knowing that the man outside had already murdered one of your friends. Hey, true crime addicts! Before we dive into one of America's most horrifying mass murders, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stay updated with stories like this one. And if you're watching this late at night, well, maybe check if your doors are locked. Just saying. On July 14, 1966, Chicago woke up to a nightmare that would haunt the city for generations. 8 young nurses brutally murdered in their dormitory. Their only crime? Being in the wrong place at the wrong time when Richard Speck, a man with a twisted soul and a rope in his pocket, decided to make their residence his hunting ground. But before we get to that terrifying night, let me paint you a picture of South Chicago Community Hospital's nurse residence. It was a quiet, peaceful place where young women lived while training to save lives. The kind of place where you'd expect to hear laughter and gossip about cute doctors, not screams of terror. Like and subscribe if you want more chilling true crime stories like this one. And trust me, you'll need someone to talk to after hearing what happened next. Now let's meet our victims. Mina Jo Schmale, 24. Patricia Matusek, 20. Pamela Wilkening, 20. Suzanne Ferris, 21. Marion Jordan, 20. Marlita Gargolo, 23. Valentina Passion, 23. And Gloria Davy, 22. 8 young women with dreams, ambitions, and families who loved them. 8 lives that would be snuffed out in a single night of terror. But here's where it gets even more disturbing, folks. One nurse survived. And her story. Well, let's just say it's the stuff nightmares are made of. If you're already feeling unsettled, drop a face screaming in fear in the comments. 'Cause believe me, this story is about to get way darker. Richard Speck wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Chicago that night. A few weeks earlier, he had been arrested for stabbing a woman in a bar fight. But due to a clerical error, he was released. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under your bed. They're the ones that bureaucratic mistakes let walk free. Quick reminder to hit that like button if you're as invested in this story as I am. It really helps the channel, and honestly, we all need a little support when diving into cases this dark. As night fell on July 13, 1966, 9 nurses were settling in for what they thought would be just another quiet evening. Some were studying for upcoming exams. Others were chatting about their day. None of them knew that Richard Speck had been watching their building, learning their routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. At 11 p.m., there was a knock on the door. At 11 p.m., Speck broke in through a window, surprising Corazon Amurao and her roommate, Patricia Matusek. Armed with a .22 caliber pistol and a hunting knife, he told them, "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need money to get to New Orleans." But money was never his real objective. If you're finding this story as chilling as I do, hit that like button. We've got a long night ahead of us. One by one, as the other nurses returned to the townhouse, Speck tied them up with strips torn from bedsheets. He gathered them in a back room, telling them he was taking them out one at a time to get money from their purses. What happened next was methodical, clinical, almost as if Speck was performing some twisted surgery of his own. He led each nurse out individually. Some he strangled, others he stabbed. Each time he returned, the remaining nurses could only wonder if they would be next. Quick reminder to subscribe if you want more deep dives into true crime cases like this. Though few are as haunting as what happened on that July night. But in the chaos of gathering the nurses, Speck made a crucial mistake. He miscounted. There were 9 nurses in the building that night, not 8. And one of them, Corazon Amurao, had managed to slide under a bed when Speck wasn't looking. For hours, Corazon lay there, listening to the muffled sounds of her friend's final moments. She heard their pleading, their footsteps, their silence. If you need a moment to process this, pause the video. Sometimes the reality of true crime is harder to handle than any horror movie. Around 3 a.m., after what must have felt like an eternity, Corazon heard something new, the sound of footsteps leaving. Till, she waited. For 2 more hours, she stayed hidden, terrified that any movement might reveal her presence if Speck was still in the building. Finally, at dawn, she gathered her courage. She pushed open a window and screamed for help. "They're all dead! All my friends are dead. He killed them all." If you're still with us, you're about to learn how this night of terror finally came to an end. Drop a folded hands in the comments if you're thinking about Corazon and the incredible strength she showed that night. The Chicago police arrived to find a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Each nurse had been killed in a different way, showing the calculated nature of Speck's rampage. The medical examiner would later say it was the worst crime scene he'd ever witnessed. But here's where this story takes another turn. 'Cause Richard Speck thought he'd killed all 9 nurses. He had no idea that Corazon Amurao was alive. And she had seen his face. Before we move on to how they caught this monster, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the conclusion of this incredible story. The manhunt for Richard Speck became the largest in Chicago's history. But here's the crazy part, they found him almost by accident. And if you think the story's been wild so far, wait until you hear this. 2 days after the murders, a man named Claude Lunsford was drinking at a local bar called the Shipyard Inn. He noticed someone familiar sitting nearby, someone whose left arm bore a distinctive tattoo reading "Born to Raise Hell." Sound familiar? If you're connecting the dots, drop a magnifying glass tilted left in the comments. Lunsford recognized Speck from the newspaper descriptions and called the police. But by the time they arrived, Speck was gone. However, their killer hadn't gone far. In fact, he was about to make his biggest mistake yet. Later that same day, Speck checked into the Star Hotel under the name Richard Franklin. But he wasn't there to hide. No, our Born to Raise Hell killer decided to attempt suicide by cutting his wrists and inner arms with a broken wine bottle. Quick reminder to hit that like button if you're as invested in seeing justice served as I am. When the hotel staff found him, they rushed him to Cook County Hospital. And here's where fate played its hand, Doctor. Leroy Smith, the resident on duty, recognized the Born to Raise Hell tattoo from the police bulletins. Within hours, the hospital was swarming with police. But the strongest piece of evidence against Speck wasn't his tattoo. It was Corazon Amurao, the nurse who survived. When she testified at his trial, the entire courtroom fell silent as she stood up, pointed at Speck, and declared, "This is the man." Her testimony was so powerful that Speck's own lawyer later admitted he knew his client was doomed the moment Corazon identified him. If you're finding Corazon's courage inspiring, you're not alone. Leave a flexed biceps in the comments to show support for this incredible survivor. The trial lasted just 12 days. The jury took only 49 minutes to find Speck guilty. He was sentenced to death, but in 1972, his sentence was commuted to 1,200 years in prison when the Supreme Court temporarily banned capital punishment. Now, here's where things get even more disturbing. In 1991, a video emerged from inside Stateville Correctional Center showing Speck doing drugs and engaging in inappropriate behavior. He was barely recognizable, having gained weight and looking nothing like the killer from 1966. In the video, he showed no remorse for his crimes, even bragging about them. It was clear that the monster who walked into that nurse's residence in 1966 remained a monster until the end. Richard Speck died of a heart attack in prison on December 5, 1991. He never expressed any genuine remorse for his crimes. But this story isn't really about Richard Speck. It's about Nina, Patricia, Pamela, Suzanne, Mary, and Marlita, Valentina, and Gloria, 8 young women whose lives were cut tragically short. And it's about Corazon Amurao, who survived to ensure their killer faced justice. If this story has affected you as much as it has me, please take a moment to like and subscribe. We share these stories not for entertainment, but to remember the victims and learn from history's darkest moments. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply survive, just like Corazon did on that terrible night in Chicago. Stay safe, true crime family. And always check who's at the door before you open it.